Sayu is coming to Genshin Impact, so I thought I'd make something to celebrate her release. After a lot of consideration, I eventually decided on making her decoy, the kind of Daruma doll looking thing on the left there, out of cake. I thought it'd be pretty unique, and I've always wanted to try making a really intricate thing out of fondant, so this is a good opportunity for me to try and do that. Just as a final note before we get into the recipe, if any of you didn't know, Sayu is actually voiced by Lily Pichu, who's a pretty successful Twitch streamer, YouTuber, artist, and musician. I'll leave some links in the description to her channel if you want to check it out. I highly recommend it, you won't be disappointed. And Lily, if you're watching, I hope you enjoyed the recipe. We're first going to start by making the green tea sponge. To do this, place 2 green tea bags into a bowl and add in 40 grams of warm milk. I'm going to let that brew for about 10 minutes. In the meantime, crack 3 eggs into a large bowl and then separate into the yolks and whites. You can do this by just cracking them in whole and then grabbing the yolk and placing it into a separate bowl. Don't worry, it's not going to break. To help with the whipping, add in 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar, a little bit of sugar to each, and then 1/4 teaspoon of salt to the yolks. Then roll up your sleeves because you're going to need to beat these quite hard for quite a long time to get them nice, light and fluffy. And this is what you're looking for in the end. You might not believe this, but this is actually the egg yolks. They're super white and light and fluffy. Exactly what you want. Then just do exactly the same with the egg whites. This takes a little bit longer, but in the end they'll be nice and glossy. When you get to this point, mix them together by folding them very carefully and very gently. We're trying to keep as much air in there as possible, but this is super satisfying to do, so don't worry about taking your time, it's quite relaxing. When they're nicely folded together, we're going to add our dry ingredients, which is 54 grams of plain flour and 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. Sift them into the bowl, but don't press through the final lumps, just set them aside and throw them away. Now with these first folds, we're just trying to get it roughly incorporated. We've got some oil and milk to add in later on, and that's going to help finish it off, so just roughly incorporate it and try and break up any of the big lumps of flour that are in there. Once you've done that, mix together 30 grams of vegetable oil with our milk from earlier, and place it into a bowl along with a little spoonful of our mixture, and you're going to mix them together to evenly incorporate them. Once you've done that, pop that all back into the main mixture, and then continue folding about 25 or 30 times until you get a nice even mixture, no lumps of flour and no lumps of milk and oil. It should be all even and perfect. Looking for something like this. The final step before baking is to prepare our tin. I have these spring form tins which make getting the cake out at the end super easy, but any cake tin will do. These are 7 inches wide or 18 centimeters in diameter. So I've just rubbed this margarine all around the inside, thrown in about a dessert spoonful of flour, and we're going to tap the edges to kind of distribute it evenly around the inside of the tin. Once you've done the bottom, you can turn the cake tin onto its side and tap away, and it should throw the flour onto the edge, which you can then just rotate around, and so you've got a nice even covering all around the side of the tin. To finish off, just turn it upside down and give it a few smacks. That will get any excess flour out, and then you should have a perfectly coated cake tin ready for baking in. Now all of the batter will go into one tin, so just distribute it into there, making sure you get everything out of the bowl. We don't want to waste any of it. And then when you got to that point and it's nice and level and flat, pop in the oven at 170 degrees without the fan on, or 150 degrees with the fan on, for 30 minutes. After that time, the cake should have risen slightly and be nice and golden brown. These springform tins do help get the cake out really easily. Just unclip it, take off the bottom, and then place it on a wire rack to cool for about 30 minutes until it's cold to the touch. Then I'm going to stamp out some circles of dough, cut off the top to make it nice and flat, and then cut it in half. You should have 6 circles in the end. Then going to move on to the ganache. We're going very quickly here. It's a 1-to-1 mix of dark chocolate and cream. Going to warm them both in the microwave very gently, just until the chocolate's melted and the cream is warm to the touch. And I'm going to mix them together, and that should give you a perfect glossy ganache. It works every single time. We're doing a chocolate and pistachio ganache though, so I've taken a little handful of pistachios here. I'm going to roughly chop them into small pieces. I pop them into my mortar and pestle with a little bit of sugar and then ground them into a finer powder. We're going to thicken the ganache up slightly by whipping it, so once it's cooled, give it a good whip. This will incorporate some air into it and make it nice and spreadable like this. The last step is just to add in them pistachio crumbs, give it a mix, and then we're ready to go. So this is the easy part of layering the cake. You're just going to spread some ganache over each cake circle, and then when you've done that, stack them into one big tower. We're going to be carving and coating this in ganache later, so I put a chopstick straight through the middle just to give me something to hold on to, and then started carving it. So I know roughly the Daruma doll's got this kind of egg shape where it's kind of narrower at the top and wider at the bottom. So I just did these diagonal cuts, very sharp at the top and a bit shallower at the bottom, and that kind of gave me the shape I was looking for. We can do some bit of correction later on with the fondant, but it's better to get the shape right here. It gives us less work to do later on. So yeah, just go around, and when I got to that nice shape I was looking for, coated it in the ganache. Having the pistachio chunks small here is also quite handy because it means we've got no big lumps sticking out that's going to stick through the fondant. And when I was happy with this shape, I popped it on a plate and just let it chill in the fridge for 30 minutes. The final step before decorating is to make our fondant. I could have just bought this from the shop, and if you want to do that, that's fine. But I saw this really cool recipe for marshmallow fondant. I'll leave links in the description that I wanted to try out. So you just take 100 grams of marshmallows, add half a tablespoon of water, mix it and melt it in the microwave until it's nice and glossy and smooth and melted. Then add in 200 grams of icing sugar bit by bit, mixing it together until it becomes nice and dry. And then you pop it onto your work surface and begin kneading it. And it's going to turn into this nice, smooth, glossy and elastic fondant, which I think tastes a lot nicer. It's got a much nicer texture than the store-bought stuff, which tends to be kind of hard and always is too thick when they put it on cakes. Now I don't have any footage of me colouring the fondant, but it's a pretty simple process. It just takes a very long time to do. So I just took a little dab of my food colouring. It's kind of a gel-based, really concentrated one. They're the Walton ones on the left there. I'll put some links in the description if anyone wants to buy them. They're really good. I highly recommend it. So you just add a little bit of gel to your fondant and then mix it together. And the reason it takes so long is, one, getting the colour perfect is quite hard to do. It takes a few attempts. And also because the fondant's so thick, it takes ages to mix in. So it's a really slow process, and when you've got so many colours like this cake had, it takes quite a long time. But once you've got all your colours done, actually decorating the cake is quite fun. You just pop a podcast on or some music and just slowly work away little by little, decorating it and doing all the little intricate details. So roughly what I did that kind of white base layer, covered it with the kind of yellowy, creamy outer layer, and then cut out the shape for the eye holes. I've got a few of the little details, so that 4-pointed star front plate is just a square of white fondant, and then that yellow stars on top, and these red ribbons with the little yellow details on the side, and then these eyes here, so it's a white kind of semicircle with a black semicircle on top, and then the grey outline, I cut out the shape for the eye hole and layered it over the top, because if it was all stacked on top of each other, the eyes are kind of popping off the cake, so I wanted it to be kind of a bit flatter. And then there's just these little red, kind of, they're like teardrops almost, but then little details on the edge, and these little grey kind of, I don't know what they are, there's all these little details, I don't know what they are, they just look cool. So I went about and added all of them on, including the little green leaf on top. That's really important, with like the bite taken out of it. And yeah, I think it did a pretty good job. It took quite a while to make, I'll explain more about that later on, but it was really fun, and I'm really happy with the result in the end. So we'll just take a little cut out of the back. You can see that dark chocolate and pistachio ganache nicely layered between all of that green tea sponge, and I'll pass it over to Past Jake to explain more about what I thought on the day. Alright then, so we're finished. You can see the finished, I guess it's a Daruma doll, that's what I'm going to call it, Sayu's Daruma doll. This is the hardest thing I've probably had to make. So I've done croissants were probably the hardest technical thing, but just the design of this, working with this like marshmallow fondant, was really, really difficult. So I have a new level of respect for bakers and cake decorators and stuff, because you see it on TV. I watched Ace of Cakes when I was younger. It looks so easy, but this is actually really hard. I'm not actually too fond of fondant. I think it's quite sweet. This is the marshmallow one, so I'm interested to see how that tastes, but let's give it a go. Yeah, that fondant's actually way better than some of the other stuff I've used. As you can see, hopefully you can see, it's super, super thin and soft as well, so texturally it's not that kind of impactful, you can't really feel it that much. And we just get that like subtle flavour of the green tea coming through in the cake, and there's pistachios as well, so it's inside's really good. That's kind of the key thing. We've got to have style and substance, so hopefully we've got both in this recipe. So this style of cake is quite time consuming. I'd say actually making the inside probably took, I don't know, an hour maybe. I could probably do it quicker now I've done it once, but doing all this design work on the outside does take quite a long time, so probably 7 hours or so for this one. Obviously it's a one-off because it's for a special Genshin video, but I think I can see myself doing this for children's cakes. So there's a couple of young children in my family, one of whom really likes dinosaurs, and I can see him really liking a dinosaur themed cake, so maybe for one of his birthdays I might do that. That sounds quite fun. But yeah, thank you all very much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.